Good morning and welcome to everyone. My name is Prit Patel. I am the Senior Economic Development Manager for the North Central Texas Economic Development District, which is housed in the North Central Texas Council of Governments. And so we work on behalf of the same 16 county region, and we refer to ourselves as the COG. But I'm so grateful to have Amy Hodges and some of our transportation folks from the COG here today to make a presentation on EV charging stations, an update on what's going on with EV charging stations, but as well what the economic development benefits are of having EV charging stations in local communities. And so we are going to use the chat feature for any questions anyone has. If you will pose your questions in the chat, Amy will try to answer them at the end of the presentation. In the meantime, I am going to turn it over to Amy to move forward on the presentation so that we can make sure we use the time the best way possible. Again, welcome, and we're excited to have you all here. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. I'm going to share my screen real quick. Well, good morning. Is everyone able to see that okay, Brett?
Yes, we can see your screen. Thanks.
Oh, great. I'm Amy Hodges. I'm a Principal Air Quality Planner in the Transportation Department at the Council of Governments, and I'm on the Air Quality team. And I'll be presenting today on what we're doing with EV infrastructure planning and how that may affect economic development as well as workforce. So just real quick to give you an orientation. So as I stated, we are the Council of Governments. We are the regional transportation. We do transportation planning for a 12 county area. So we are the Metropolitan Planning Organization. And then, so those, the 16 counties for the region are shown on the map. And then we're also the Clean Cities Coalition, and Lori Clark is our director. I'll talk a little bit more about Clean Cities here in a second. I mentioned that we're on the air quality team. If you look at the map, the counties, the 10 counties that are colored in kind of a pinkish red color, those counties do not meet federal standard for ground level ozone. So, and transportation is a big contributor to our ground level ozone problem. So that is our motivating factor for our programs and initiatives. Mostly it comes from tailpipe emissions. And so that's really what we focus on. So we're very excited about zero emission vehicles coming to the forefront to help with that. As I mentioned, we are a Clean Cities Coalition. That's a Department of Energy program. So the little yellow dots on the map show where all the coalitions are. You notice in Texas, we do have some sister coalitions in Houston, Austin, and San Antonio. So the Clean Cities Coalitions, that covers about 80% of the US population, mostly focused on where you know, the most population is, of course, because of the tailpipe emissions. So a little bit more about what we do as a Clean Cities Coalition. We focus on vehicle emissions, as I said, light, medium, and heavy duty vehicles. We promote the use of alternative and renewable fuels and the infrastructure that's needed to deploy those. So think electric, of course, but also propane, CNG, renewable natural gas, hydrogen. And then there's a lot of things you can do besides just, you know, adopt an alternative fuel. If you just reduce your idling, that helps a lot towards reducing emissions. It also saves you money, saves you on fuel costs. But, you know, vehicles, they emit more when they're idling than when they're just driving down the road. So idle reduction is very, very important. And then another focus area with Clean Cities are the new mobility choices. So, you know, connected vehicles, autonomous vehicles, e-scooters, e-bikes, electric motorcycles, those kinds of things. And then emerging transportation technologies. So, ride shares, and it's really great. Be really great to get, all the rideshare companies to be offering EVs as an option. So a little bit more about what we do in our air quality team and as a Clean Cities Coalition. We do a lot having to do with funding. We keep track of all the funding that's out there. We have a great website. You'll see that later in the webinar. And we try to assist our public and private fleets in finding funding to turn over those older vehicles in the fleet and get them in newer vehicles. We also apply at the federal level for funding quite often, actually. And then if we're awarded, we turn around and we rebate that out to fleets in our local area. We do a lot of education and technical assistance having to do with alternative fuels and the newer technologies. We hold educational webinars. We hold fleet manager roundtables so that they can do peer-to-peer exchange. We also develop best practices, resources, and what have you. We also, because we're a Clean Cities Coalition, we can tap into the national labs that are associated with the Clean Cities program, such as the National Renewable Energy Lab and Argonne National Lab. So if there's any questions out there from a technical nature, if we can't answer them, then we can get the answer. And then we do a lot of planning. We were involved in the alternative fuel corridor designation. So you'll hear more about that here in a minute. So I'm not going to talk about the ZEV infrastructure here because the whole webinar is going to be on infrastructure. And then we do a lot of raising awareness for consumers with electric vehicles. We hold a big event every year in coordination with the Natural Drive Electric Week. So we also post success stories and hold other community events on our as a Clean Cities Coalition. So our air quality team, we're divided into three sections. One team within Lori Clark's team is the fleet and driver guidance and planning. That's called, I believe we've changed our name as Clean Vehicle Initiatives now. And that's where we work with the public and private fleets quite closely to deploy clean fleet technologies and also do the matching up with the funding. The other part of the team, infrastructure planning and readiness, and you'll be hearing about that today. And then the third section of the team is energy integration. So that has to do with electric grid impacts and improving resiliency in our technologies. Okay, I want to give just a little background. Since we're going to be talking about electric vehicle infrastructure today, I wanted to just give a brief overview of some basic things in case those of you there's some out there that aren't quite sure. So zero emission vehicles, that means there are no tailpipe emissions. As far as EVs go, there's what is called a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. That's a vehicle that has both an electric motor as well as an internal combustion engine. You can plug this vehicle in. That's why it's called a plug-in hybrid. And so it doesn't have a lot of range. They can have anywhere from, 6 miles electric to 50 miles electric. And a lot of times that's really a great option. Can get you around all day with your just daily miles around your neighborhood, maybe to work and back, using just electric miles. And then the next one is the all-electric vehicle. It only has an electric motor, so it has a larger battery, and you plug it in to completely charge the vehicle. And then there's also what's called a fuel cell electric vehicle. This is also zero emissions. It runs on compressed hydrogen, and it has an electric motor to drive the drivetrain. So this would refuel, a fuel cell electric vehicle would refuel at a hydrogen station. It would not plug into a charger. So the first two is what we're really talking about today, plugging into infrastructure. Okay, just a real high level overview of the charging infrastructure. So there's 3 basic levels: think slow, medium, and fast charging. So level 1 is the slowest. Think of it as just plugging your vehicle into the outlet in your garage, for instance. This is what you would use for overnight charging, and it is fine for that. Where the vehicle is going to be parked for, like 10 hours or something like that. And then level 2 is kind of the medium speed charging. And this would require the kind of outlet maybe that your washing machine is using, like a 240 volt, or I'm sorry, 220 volt. So there's different levels of level 2, believe it or not, depending on the kilowatts, but this is for, longer stops. Maybe you could probably charge the vehicle in like 4 to 6 hours, something like that. And then DC fast charge, that's the fastest. There's even different levels of DC fast charging. Sometimes it's referred to as level 3, but this is your the fastest type of infrastructure you have. This is more the 480 volt, and that you could completely charge an electric vehicle. The really fast ones, 30 minutes, up to maybe an hour, depending on the power of that DC fast charger. So today we'll be talking about level 2 and DC fast charging a lot. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of set the stage on why infrastructure planning has become so important. So electric vehicle adoption is on an exponential curve. Like a lot of new technology, think about when, PCs and laptops were first coming, of age, smartphones, cell phones. New technology really takes off in an exponential way. Here, we're just showing you a graph of the different types of vehicles that are adopting electric technology. That green line, those are actually transit buses. They have adopted really early. So electric buses are very popular. Everything else is kind of slower in adopting, especially heavy-duty trucks. The light-duty is this gray one. So it's been a little bit slower than the transit buses, but this is a projection. Another reason, not only are we getting a lot of funding these days for electric vehicles and electric infrastructure, but the other thing that's driving it are the manufacturers of the vehicles themselves. This is a list of not all manufacturers that are offering electric vehicles, but some of the major players. And they all have goals. So this is their goals for their percent of sales over time. So if you'll just take a glance at this 2030 line, you can see a lot of them have that as a goal. And that's really going to drive the market. So let's look at, for instance, Honda. They're predicting 40% of their sales will be electric vehicles in 2030. Some of them predict, like for instance, Honda, by 2040, 100% of their sales will be electric. So, in the future, you can imagine, the only internal combustion engine cars you're going to be buying 20 years from now, they're just going to be the old used internal combustion engine cars. Okay, so an idea of what's happening in Texas and in our area as far as electric vehicle adoption and how quickly that's happening. So here I've just pulled some numbers for May of last year to May of this year. You can see the increase. So this is an exponential increase year over year over year. So, and then DFW, it's a little bit quicker than the state overall. We have a really good website, and I'm going to share my screen and show you a little bit of what you can see on our registration website. And then I'm also going to show you what's going on with TxDOT and their maps that they're offering for planning. But here on this map, for instance, we have the charging overlaid on electric vehicle registration. So you can see that the only areas that do not have any electric vehicle registration are the zip codes that are white in color. Everything else, there's like the very lightest color is 1 to 50 EVs. And you can see that there's not many dots in a lot of these areas, meaning there's not hardly any infrastructure, and yet you have people adopting electric vehicles. So the only thing you can think of is they're probably charging in their garage. But when more and more of the state start adopting electric vehicles, they're not going to be able to travel very well in their electric vehicles to some of these areas. And that's the problem that we're trying to solve. So you can see most of the EV adoption is in the populated metroplexes, and that's where most of the charging is today. Let me go to registration page. This is our Clean Cities website, and I want to show you what we've done with registration data and maps. Let's look at DFW. So we have a tool, the North Texas Electric Vehicle Mapping Tool, and you can make this go full screen and zoom in. It's loading. It's taking a while. Here we go. So I've turned on a few layers here. I'll show you what I've turned on. So I'm showing the charging stations, the designated electric corridors. They're showing in green. We're showing our North Central Texas boundary, North Central Texas Council of Governments boundary. I'm going to turn on the environmental index here in a second. And so you're seeing infrastructure overlaid onto the areas of the most EV registration. You can see that the darker, the more registration there is, and you're seeing it more in these, Collin County, Denton County, Dallas, and Tarrant. I'm going to turn, and so there is some EV registration here in the southeastern part of Dallas, but there's really no infrastructure. And then the legend here, you can see the legend. Okay, I'm going to turn on the environmental index, environmental justice index. So this is showing in yellow, you're seeing the regional percentage for population below poverty. In green, you're seeing above the regional percentage for both minority and poverty. Where the yellow and the green intersect, that's the blue. So you can see there's a correlation between environmental justice indexes and where the infrastructure is today. So we do not want to leave these areas behind, because as we've already shown you, there's going to be a time when it's not going to, you're mostly going to be buying EVs. They're going to be the option. And so we don't want these areas to be behind in being able to charge. So I'm going to go back. It's not the most efficient way, sorry. I'm going to go back to what we can show you. This is a really great tool. So we have all the registration lowered in what's called Microsoft Power BI, and it's displayed here. I'm going to go full screen on this. So here you can actually see EV registration by city, by zip code, by county. You can even see which models are most adopted by zip code, county, and city. So this would help you in your planning as far as, you know, you might be wondering, well, how many do I have? And you can page over to the next page, for instance. All the zip codes are listed with numbers, with totals at the bottom. This is by, you know, showing you every model of EV, but it's really probably the totals you're more interested in. And then by city. If you go all the way to the right, you can see totals. And by county. So these are things that we as planners use to know where is the need. And there's going to be a really big focus on environmental justice as well. The other thing I wanted to just show you real quick, so this will also help in, actually I'm going to go to the text map later when I talk about what we're doing as far as the Texas EV charging plan. So here we are, here's where we stand today. For level 2, we have about 2,600 level 2 chargers, and we have 343 DC fast chargers, and this is for the entire state. So a little bit closer in, which I've already kind of shown you on our EV North Texas tool. Here you're seeing EV fast charge. This is our infrastructure overlaid onto our EV registration, and then here you can see how many plugs there are in our different counties and fast charging. And again, you can see this. There's some areas that they have a considerable amount of EV registration. There's just not much charging there. So that doesn't bode, that's fine for the people that are charging in their garage. This does not bode well for people that are in apartments and condos, things like that, where they don't have a garage where they can charge, or they live in an older house where maybe there's not electricity in the garage, or maybe there's not even a garage. So here we're showing DC fast charging across Texas. So there was some funding a couple of years ago through the Texas Volkswagen Environmental Mitigation Program that put out a lot more DC fast chargers, which was very helpful. It's still not enough, but it put out 170 plugs at 41 sites. So you can see those represented. So the blue dots represent what the Texas Volkswagen funding put out there. And then the orange ones were already there. Okay, so there's a lot of funding coming from the federal level. NEVI stands for National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula funding. So I'm going to talk about how that impacts us. So that funding was available to the states. The states needed to, apply for it. So TxDOT did. part of that requirement to get that money, you had to create a plan. So TxDOT did that. So Texas is going to receive about $408 million over 5 years to deploy EV charging. So the first part of that plan will be to put one DC fast charger about every 50 miles along the designated alternative fuel corridors. The chargers should be within 1 mile of an exit. Whoops. There'll be 4 connectors on each one of those. And so a little bit more about this. I'll talk about the EV charging plan, Texas EV charging plan. So in the first year, we'll put a DC fast charger about every 50 miles along the corridor. We estimate that to be about 55 stations statewide, and that will use up about $48.5 million of that $408 million. And then years 2 through 5, after we saturate the alternative fuel corridors, then in the subsequent years, we'll put a DC fast charger on near or at every county seat in Texas. So that will really help to fill out, the state. And then we'll also start building out with any money left over, we'll start building out in the urban areas. So this is really going to add to the infrastructure. So here we are again, phase 1. So this map is showing after phase 1, what it'll look like. So the blue dots are going to be additional fast charging. So now you're starting to see along the interstates that, now there's starting to be real connection across the state. So then phase 2, once phase 2 is done, so that now you're seeing the dots at or near every county seat. Now it's really starting to fill in. And then as a metropolitan planning organization, we'll be involved with planning the build out in the urban areas. So we will actually be recommending what type of charger, whether it be level 2 or DC fast, and the actual locations. So we anticipate that in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, we're estimating we'll have about $64.5 million to build out in the DFW area, in the urbanized area. I want to now pop to a TxDOT map. So this is the TxDOT website. You can review their Texas EV charging plan here. There's a lot of resources here. They have a great program story map on how things have evolved. You can also access what I just showed you, our EV registration tool. They have that here. There's also, this is really what I want to show you, this interactive map. This is where you can actually make suggestions on where you think we need charging. So you can zoom in to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so this is where people have dropped pins on where they want charging, and you can also drop a comment. So you do that by just clicking on, I'm up here at the top. You can just drag this down and drop it and put in some information. You can, I don't think you have to put your name, but you could, but you need to say something like, I think there needs to be a charger here at this park in this neighborhood. Or you could just drag the comment icon and then put your comment in about where you think charging needs to be. So maybe you don't have a specific spot, but you think maybe this area is somewhere where it's needed. If you click over here on the left, so there's instructions on how to use it. There's also a survey you can fill out. which would be a really good idea. I think they want this filled out by June 22nd. So it'd be really great if you guys would weigh in on that. If you want to kind of just see the latest comments, this is what people have been putting out there. So here's a comment a month ago. South and Southeast Dallas are routinely ignored for infrastructure needs. That's quite apparent when you look on the map. These areas will suffer and be left behind if not addressed. Couldn't agree with that more. And we really are going to focus on that. So, and that's where that comment is right here. And this is also an environmental justice area. So we'd really appreciate it if you go out there and make your recommendations. So a little bit more about what our approach is going to be for the phase 2 of the Texas EV charging plan. So we're going to identify areas to address community needs. Again, here's our infrastructure overlaid onto the Justice 40, I should say environmental justice areas. And you'll hear me say Justice 40, environmental justice. Justice 40 is an initiative that was started by the Biden administration. Justice 40 means 40% of the benefits of the federal funding need to benefit environmental justice areas. So, minority, poverty, those underserved communities need to get 40% of the benefit. So we'll be filling in gaps, as I mentioned. So we'll be looking at things like, how many miles is it to the next charger? Those are gaps, or how many minutes it is, driving time to the next charger. We definitely want to ensure there's stations along major travel corridors. So think those secondary highways, not the interstates, but like 303, just major parkways. We want to focus on areas that are still underserved, as I mentioned. We want to think about those multifamily properties. If you don't have a garage so that you can charge in, you're going to be looking for street parking. You're going to be looking for charging where you frequent, like parks and grocery stores, where you work. All those things will really help people that don't have a garage to charge in, will really help them adopt electric vehicles. We do want to keep grid resilience in mind and how EVs can contribute. It's possible that solar and battery storage could be incorporated into these chargers, and that would help with that surge in demand if everyone were to plug in at once and impact the grid. But actually, our grid has plenty of capacity, and not everyone's going to plug in their electric vehicle all at once and charge. So we're not that concerned. There's just going to be some areas where maybe there's a lot of heavy duty vehicles with very extremely large batteries. And that's something that requires attention. We also want to look at where we can help with making buildings EV ready and streamline those processes and have best practices in place there. So again, things we'll be thinking about when we build out the urban areas. We want to take in consideration the environmental justice, which is the minority poverty areas. How close are public chargers? We want to fill in those gaps. We want to think about the public transit usage, the areas of a lot of apartments and condos and housing age. Just because you have a house, it doesn't mean you have a garage that has electricity in it. Maybe you have an older home and you have a garage, but there's no electricity. Other things that we need to think about You know, usually we think about just all the light duty cars, you know, the sedans and what have you that are adopting electric technology. We really need to see the same thing happen in the medium and heavy duty sectors. These are typically diesel trucks and they emit a lot of emissions. So there's quite a bit of gain for air quality if we can get more electric vehicles adopting in these sectors. And it will happen over time, but it's not going to happen as quickly as the light duty sedans. But things we need to think about infrastructure wise, these are larger vehicles. They're just not going to be able to charge in the same kind of physical environment that a little car is going to charge in. For instance, this picture here is showing, you know, a medium duty truck parked across all these lanes in a parking lot to plug in. So a little bit of what's been happening in our region as far as adoption of electric vehicles for medium and heavy duty. We're seeing it in our transit agencies. DART and Trinity Metro have embraced electric trucks, and they're only going to be expanding that. We're seeing electric school buses. We already have 3 electric school buses deployed at Everman ISD. Dallas ISD is going to be getting, oh gosh, at least 10 to 25 electric school buses. I can't remember the number. There's interest in electric refuse haulers. And then in the private sector, we're seeing some adoption with terminal tractors. These are the tractors that they're not on the road, but they're in warehouse situations where they're hauling the trailers that fit on the Class 8 tractors. They're hauling them around in the yard. That's a great improvement over a little diesel tractor that's running all day, hauling things around. So we've got some deployments there. Also some short haul truck deployments, and then airport ground support equipment. Those are called tugs. So they're running on an airport on the air side of the airport, tugging airplanes around. So I've mentioned designated alternative fuel corridors. That was a federal highway initiative that we participated in to designate alternative fuel corridors. We followed that up with a plan that we created. It was completed in August of last year. It's the I-45 corridor plan. So this is recommending zero emission vehicle infrastructure between Dallas, Fort Worth, and Houston. So this is a designated alternative fuel corridor, and we're building upon that with some initiatives, some funding that we just applied to. I'll talk about that here in a minute. But there's a lot of freight activity, a lot of big trucks that are running in the Texas Triangle, especially between Dallas and Houston. So that's what was the focus of this plan. So there was funding released by Federal Highways. It was called the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Program. It was established by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. It offered $700 million split across 2 programs. One was for the corridor program. This is split evenly. And so $350 million for a corridor program and $350 million for the community program. Lots of money offered. It would pay up to 80% of the total project cost. So this is to deploy publicly accessible electric vehicle charging and other alternative fueling infrastructure along corridors and communities. So a little bit more about the corridor part of that funding, designed to build EV infrastructure along the alternative fuel corridors. Here we're showing those corridors. It's in Texas. These are the interstates, basically. So we thought this funding was an opportunity to start deploying what we had identified in our I-45 zero emission plan. So our approach, and we did apply to this funding, our approach was we had a call for partners that we opened up in March. We wanted to establish public-private partnerships to scope out zero emission vehicle infrastructure projects to support medium and heavy duty vehicles. It needed to be publicly accessible and located along an alternative fuel corridor. We received 12 proposals by our deadline. We selected the top ones. We coordinated with those proposal teams to refine our application to federal highways. So our proposal ended up being for hydrogen refueling for up to 5 stations around the Texas Triangle. This is where we see a lot of freight. And like, as I mentioned, these medium and heavy duty vehicles, they contribute a lot of emissions because they're diesel. So if we can bring hydrogen to Texas and introduce that into the freight movement, we're really going to improve the air quality in these metropolitan areas and also along these routes. So this will really help the communities in these metropolitan areas as well as the ones along the routes. Our project zones were Fort Worth, where we have the Alliance Texas Global Logistics Hub, the Dallas zone, which is where the Southern Dallas County Inland Port is, and then Houston, the southeast corner of the triangle, and then the southwest corner of the triangle, which is San Antonio. So for instance, in Houston, there's what's called Port Houston. A lot of freight comes in through their water port, so to speak, and they have a lot of intermodal facilities there. They have 2 large airports there, Hobby and Houston Intercontinental. So they have a ton of freight. In San Antonio, there's what's called Port San Antonio. They're getting freight coming in from Laredo, Las Cruces, as well as from Houston coming across the triangle. Port San Antonio is the second inland port that marries up rail, ground, and air. The other one is the Alliance Texas Global Logistics Hub up here in Fort Worth. So I just can't tell you how much freight there is moving around this corridor. It's just amazing. And it's really impacting the communities around these hubs with all the diesel trucks. So having those gradually become zero emission is our goal. And that's not going to happen unless we get the infrastructure out there. So that would be hydrogen. We really see that for the long haul trucks. For shorter haul freight movement, like within the metropolitan areas, we see that more being electric as well as hydrogen. But for the long hauls, we see hydrogen being the answer. So we did submit a proposal just the other day for $70 million to build out hydrogen stations that would support the Texas Triangle. For the community program, we decided we would, as a Council of Governments, apply on behalf of the region. So we wanted to help build out electric infrastructure in the urban areas. So we applied for funding to provide up to 100 charging ports. These are all publicly accessible, and we would emphasize Justice 40 and the focus areas pointed out by the Federal Highway Program. We also decided we would create specialized technical teams to handle things that typically would slow down big projects like this. So we wanted specialized teams that were really good at coordinating zoning and permitting and codes across all the communities that would be involved, as well as help navigate environmental clearances that are needed, as well as Buy America. So we did submit a proposal for the maximum allowed award for this program, which was $15 million. And we submitted that on just the other day on June 13th. So we're very excited about these two proposals. We're really hoping we get awarded. I think it's going to mean a lot to our region and a lot to Texas. Another initiative that's going on right now is the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. This is a grant made available by the Inflation Reduction Act at the federal level. So the purpose is to develop and implement plans for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and other harmful air pollutants. It is being administered by the EPA. So there's two phases to it. Phase one is to create planning grants. And then phase two is to implement activities identified in the planning grant. So phase one, it made available $1 million to metropolitan statistical areas. Dallas-Fort Worth is a metropolitan statistical area. We have that much population that we qualified. The Council of Governments applied for that. This is formula funding, but you have to apply for it. So we did. So we are the lead organization on behalf of the Dallas-Fort Worth, Arlington Metropolitan Statistical Area. We'll be responsible for oversight and managing the grant funds and coordinating all the activities and deliverables. So this includes the following counties listed here. Neighboring jurisdictions can also be participating. The state of Texas will also be getting $3 million. So at the state level, they also chose to tap into this program. And so to be eligible for phase two, which will be competitive, the project you propose must be in the planning grant. So we definitely didn't want to miss out on the competitive funding possible. So we wanted to participate in phase one. So you may wonder, what does this have to do with infrastructure? Well, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, that may involve the deployment of electric vehicles. So that's why I'm mentioning it. So this is just an overview of the deliverables that'll be coming. March 1st will be the priority plan. Deliverable 2 will come in summer of 2025. That'll be the comprehensive climate action plan. And then final report 2027. So the next steps that are going on with this. So we'll start having meetings this summer. Be hosting a working group of local governments to develop the climate action plan. If you're interested in participating, Savannah Nance on our team is leading this effort, and this is her email. So feel free to reach out to her. And then additional details are available on this website. So we're very excited about this for the entire region. Okay, I'd like to talk a little bit about charging as a destination. So I think back in time, years and years ago, when the railroads were first getting developed, everybody wanted the railroad to come through their town because it was just a tremendous economic boom for that town. And then it was more the interstates. You know, you want your interstate going through your town. Well, in the future, it's going to be, do you have electric charging stations? Because like, as we already said earlier in this presentation, more and more people are going to be buying EVs. It's going to get to the point where your only choice is an EV. So people like to take road trips in their car. So we don't want them to feel like, I can't buy an EV because I can't go on a road trip. So your town and your city needs to be ready for the influx of electric vehicles. You don't want to miss out on everyone. So EV drivers, typically, they plan ahead on their trip. And they're also looking for things to do while they're charging their vehicle. I'm showing here the alternative fuel data center station locator. Here you can actually route your trip. So I routed a trip from Dallas to Hot Springs, for instance, and it's showing me along the way, the dots here, the green dots, those are the charging stations within 2 miles of my route. And then you could click on a dot and you can actually get more detail about it. And they're also listed here on the left. But EV drivers, they typically have apps on their phones where they're, planning their route and looking for stations. So it's definitely something that needs to be considered. So for EV drivers, taking a break for 30 minutes to an hour, possibly they want to charge at a DC fast charger. A great place for those chargers would be restaurants and shopping and rest stops, things they're going to be going to. It'd be great if, these things within walking distance of the charger. So you want your charger where these things are. And a lot of times a level 2 charger will work. A lot of people, maybe they're not driving very far. Maybe they're just in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex and they're driving from Arlington to Louisville, or, they're in Grapevine and they want to go to Six Flags in Arlington. They're not driving huge differences, but maybe they want to top off their battery while they're parked at Six Flags, for instance. And then overnight charging, a level 2 charger would be fine there. You have all night to charge. This is where you would want chargers at hotels and campgrounds. And there are actually a lot of hotels that are deploying. They have plans to deploy chargers at their hotels. We see that in the news all the time. So that, and along with the chargers that we're deploying with the Texas EV charging plan along the interstates, all this is going to fill in. But these little towns that aren't on the interstate, it's going to be really, really important for them to have charging. And it's going to be a great economic boom for them. So the towns that don't have it, they're going to be missing out on a lot of activity. Here I'm just listing some resources for you to read a little bit more. This is a little quick video. It's a 2-minute video, which is kind of interesting. It's, a couple of people are interviewed talking about what they're looking for as an EV driver. This is a great website for reports, the Transportation Energy Institute. They're a non-advocacy research organization. This is one of the several studies that they have on their website. This is a consumer survey about driving behavior. It's very informative. Another resource is the Rural EV Infrastructure Toolkit. This is to help rural communities scope, plan, and identify ways they can get funding and deploy electric charging. The Council of Governments are actually, our team did a YouTube presentation. We did a presentation on community as a destination that's posted on YouTube. That's linked here for you to watch. And then, as I mentioned, the Alternative Fuels Data Center, they have lots of resources on EVs. And then there's the Alternative Fueling Station Locator, where you can drill in and see where charging stations are in your neighborhood. And that's a great planning tool. Okay, workforce needs. Well, with this demand, this increased deployment of electric vehicles and this huge demand for charging, and we're trying to meet this with our planning and deployment of charging stations. We need people to maintain these. Well, for one thing, first of all, we need a workforce to actually deploy these stations. And then we're going to need electricians and technicians to maintain these. If these stations are not available and they're not reliable, this just is not going to work. So we need a workforce that's ready and able to maintain these chargers. And we see this as a local workforce. So they would be involved in the initial deployment and then the ongoing maintenance of these chargers. This is a great opportunity for the local community colleges to have a curriculum, to train technicians. We need a lot more electricians, licensed electricians. And then I wanted to highlight this training that's available. To take that to get this certification, the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Training Program certification, you need to be a state licensed or certified electrician. So this is a technical installation curriculum. It was developed in collaboration with utilities, electric charging station manufacturers, manufacturers of the electric vehicles. So it's a very comprehensive, respected certification. So I wanted to mention that. So, even just developing the workforce is really important for economic development. And then I wanted to mention all the funding that's available for getting electric vehicles and infrastructure. There's a lot of tax credits. There's a rebate to buy light-duty vehicles. They've expanded that. It can be a new vehicle or a lease. There's also, you can get an incentive for even a used EV, which is really important for people that can't afford a new one. All this is on our website with the link here. We keep a comprehensive list of all funding, whether it's currently available or will be opening up sometime in the future. But more funding, there's the Rural Business Development Grants. This is for EV charging stations that can be funded. And then there's a lot of TERP, what we call TERP. The Texas Commission on Environmental Quality has the TERP program, which is Texas Emission Reduction Plan. Within that, there are about 10 different funding programs. One of them is listed here in this table, the Alternative Fueling Facilities Program. And that's to get funding for alternative fuel infrastructure as well as electric. So you can get up to 50% of the costs covered for electric charging stations with this funding. It's not open at the moment. We'll expect it to be open again next year. Things in the TERP program, they open and close at various times across the biennium. So all 10 programs underneath the TERP plan, they're not open all at once. They open and close at different times. But if you go to their website, you can link to it from our website. Actually, you can see and read more about all those programs. So some upcoming things that we are going to be involved in, and I really wanted to highlight this first one. This was some funding that was applied to by others, and we are a partner in those. So this was all funding that came out last year. And we just found out who all was awarded. So 4 of the things that we were partnering on were awarded. The first one we're very excited about. This is being led by the Clean Cities Coalition in Louisiana. And it's to develop and deploy EV charging station maintenance training curriculum to support the NEVI rollout. So we've already talked about that. The NEVI money coming to us is going to be through the Texas EV charging plan. And so our role in this will be to replicate the EV technician training that's going to be developed by this project. We're going to replicate that in our area in collaboration with community colleges, and we will be coordinating with workforce on that. So that's going to be very, very helpful with all our EV charging station rollout. Another one we're involved in, we're going to be supporting the planning and convening of all the stakeholders involved in our area for hydrogen along the Texas Triangle, as well as the Interstate 10 corridor. This will be all the way over across the United States to Los Angeles, interstate all the way. So here's another one, deploy designation program to recognize cities that implement EV-friendly processes and rules. This will help our local governments establish best practices to be EV ready, to help with the deployment of electric vehicles and charging stations. And then this one is going to be in Arlington, this last one. This will be a demonstration of electric and autonomous first and last mile deliveries. So this will be drone delivery to a particular zip code in Arlington. So we'll assist in development of that and best practices guides. So this is really a demonstration, a kind of a pilot to see how this goes and if this can be deployed on a larger scale. So those are exciting things that we're going to be involved in coming up over the next couple of years. And this is our contact information. If you have any questions about any of this, we'd be glad to answer any of your questions. And I guess we'll open it up. I see Lori Clark's on the call. She's our Clean Cities Director and our Senior Program Manager for the air quality in their air quality team.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing, Amy. First, can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Going back to what Amy was flagging to everybody about how to make your community ready to be a charging destination. There's an organization called, well, they just changed their name. Hold on. It's called the Transportation Energy Institute, and they have excellent research, which Amy has shown here. And there's a new report that is going to come out probably within the month. I was just at a conference about it, and it included a survey of EV drivers and of a variety of organizations that currently have charging on site to try to understand what is charging behavior, what kind of changes do we see in consumer behavior at a location that has charging stations. So I just wanted to put that on everybody's radar. I will drop into the chat a link to their website. I would encourage everybody to sign up to get notices about their upcoming research. But I do have in my notes just something that I wanted to share. This is my sketchy notes from the conference. And so wait for the full report to see it more formally in writing, but they had kind of what they identified as the best bundle of site features. If you're thinking about having charging stations in your community or collaborating with somebody to build them, you want a charging station to be highly visible and well lit for safety reasons, to have multiple parking spots allocated with charging infrastructure, some sort of prepared food available, like sandwiches or pizza or something like that, available 24/7, or restrooms available 24/7, a playground for children, and somewhere close by. And then, if you had to add a sixth one, visible security cameras. So those are kind of the 6 features that sort of floated to the top in a very recent survey that was just done like 2 months ago, maybe, and will be part of this report coming out soon. So I just wanted to give everybody a sneak preview of that.
Thank you both so much for the presentation, and Amy, just that wealth of information that I'm sure everyone's going to take some time to digest when we share the slides. But we do have some great questions that have been sent through the chat feature. So I'll just go down the list there, Amy, if that's okay, Amy and Lori. First question was, how can a private company get involved in the Texas EV charging plan that was referenced in slide 5?
Yes, so there, TxDOT, to begin phase 1, they're going to open up a competitive process for people to bid on study sites, what's called a study site. That's where it's been identified as a place on the alternative fuel corridor that they're going to put a DC fast charger. So you have to bid on particular sites. They have not opened that up yet. We are expecting them to open it up anytime, but they just haven't yet. They're still working out some details with Federal Highways.
Is there a way for folks that are interested in that to stay updated on what, what's current or when that might be released?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Lori.
Yeah, go to that link that Lori just put in the chat. It's also on the slide where we're talking about the Texas EV charging plan.
Okay, thank you so much. The next question, is there a schedule for educational events you have in person for property owners or drivers interested in the COGS programs to promote adoption?
So we will be, we don't have any scheduled at the moment, but we will. So Lori, if you could put in our Clean Cities events webpage link.
I will. First, I'm going to drop a link to the transportation department vendor database. Just getting out in front of another question that I know is coming up in the list. But on those events, we are always happy to work with y'all. If you would like to organize something, maybe we don't have something scheduled, but you're like, gosh, I really would love to host something. We'd love that. So if you would like to work with us to coordinate something specifically for your community, please just feel free to reach out to us at our cleancities@nctcog.org email address. And we can always put something together with you. I will say that for events that are kind of geared towards publicizing information to general public, to consumers, Sundays are better than any other day of the week because dealerships are closed, which means we can get dealership representatives off the car lot with some of the vehicles that they might have in their inventory. If it's a day that a car dealership is open, vehicle inventory is very slim across the board right now, especially electric vehicle inventory. So in order to be able to get some vehicles out there for people to be able to see and touch and feel, or maybe go for a ride in, it's really helpful to be able to lean on some of the local dealerships. And so a Sunday is your best bet. But we are happy to work with you anytime.
Great. And for everyone that's on the call, we will share not just the presentation and the recording, but the links that Lori is sharing as well. So please know that you don't have to keep up with them. The next question we have is, do you see any solar power to be used in the future?
We in conjunction with EV charging?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we do. Actually, there's some companies that it's commercially available, and we've had some municipalities in our Metroplex that have been inquiring about that. I can't remember if someone is actually deploying that or not, but there has been, Lori's nodding her head, there's been great interest in it.
There's an article that came out recently about a project that Dallas County is doing with some chargers called EV Arcs, where there's an integrated solar panel overhead. So it also serves as a shade structure for that parking space, which is great. It's actually available on the General Services Administration contract. So it's a really nice option. We don't know a lot about the project, but we know it's happening.
That's fascinating. The next question we have is, why is Tesla excluded so much in your data? Seems like it would provide a much better picture of infrastructure, health, especially since they are now allowing OEMs to use their network.
So actually, well, we do include Tesla, I believe, in a lot of our data. You'll see it on EV registration tool. That's how we know Tesla Model 3 is the most popular EV in Texas and in the Metroplex. But yes, they are, and this is all recent development. They're really opening up their network.
Mhm.
So they have a deal with Ford, and then I just heard an announcement they're partnering with GM. So the OEMs are, talking about including the charger, the Tesla connector as an option on their vehicles. And the Tesla network is great. They've really built out a lot.
Thank you. The next question we have is, when will the COG be putting out an RFP or an RFQ information regarding these sites, I guess the charging sites, and where can we find that information?
So TxDOT is the one that's going to be offering that competitive bid process for phase 1. We're only involved in phase 2 as far as planning where sites would go, where chargers would go as far as location, and then a recommendation with should it be level 2 or DC fast. So that's our role, is just siting in phase 2 of chargers in the Metroplex.
Okay, thank you so much. When do you expect to hear about the CIF grant?
So we hope to hear late summer, early fall on whether or not we were awarded.
Okay, that's exciting. Something to look forward to. Will phase 2, the other blue dots, determine specific siting for EV charging, such as TxDOT specified sites in phase 1, and will they competitively bid just like phase 1? I don't know. Does that make sense to you?
So how's it going to work out for the phase 2 building out in the urban areas as far as getting that deployment out there? Lori, you want to take that? I'm not sure.
Sure. So we know what was originally in mind, but some things are changing a little bit as the NEVI program nationwide rolls out. There's a lot of questions now to the previous inquirer and the point that they made about Tesla opening up their charging network. And now you've got other automakers who are adopting the Tesla adapter. That has triggered so many questions now because the federal standards require all charging stations funded by NEVI to use the CCS adapter, which is not the same thing as the Tesla adapter. And so now there's a lot of everything's a kerfuffle. But to your question about what phase 2 specifically will look like at this point, I think we're expecting to try to follow the same process that TxDOT did, where we will have specific study areas, which are about 2 square miles, I think is what TxDOT said. Those blue dots really represent about a 2 square mile piece of land. And if you fudge outside that specific 2 square mile boundary, that's okay, as long as you've got some justification. So we're going to be seeking guidance from TxDOT on exactly what they want from us. But at this point, that would be our expectation. And I do think there will be a competitive bid for them. The most recent conversation that I've had with TxDOT, they're not thinking that the planning for that, the coordination with MPOs across the state will even begin until this fall, because they've got to get those phase 1 sites along the interstates out for bid first before they start worrying about that next step. So we'll see. We may all be learning about this together.
Thank you so much. It sounds like a lot of things are happening about the same time. So the next question, I think that you guys answered this in the PowerPoint, but do you have information about tax credit for commercial EV charging installation in Collin County? I believe we on one of the slides, and the person may have posted the question prior to you getting to that slide.
So I did put in the chat, I put it in the Q&A. Let me drop this in the chat as well so people can see where to get like the tax forms and whatnot. But the updated tax credit is up to $100,000 per location. And by the way, if you purchase an electric vehicle for your personal use and you want to put a charger in your garage, you can get a tax credit of up to $1,000 for that as well. Yes, $100,000 per site, not to exceed 30% of the cost. But it gets really complicated because there's like rules about wages and there's rules about domestic content and things like that. So you definitely want to dig into the IRS webpage. Or we can have a follow-up conversation with you on what all the nuances are of that.
Okay, great.
This first row is the residential $1,000 tax credit.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yes, 1,000 for residential, 100,000 for commercial, subject to percentage caps.
That's great. And we'll, like I said earlier, we'll send the PowerPoint so everyone will have these links as well. But the next question is fascinating. So this comes probably from the city, but as we work to update codes, ordinances, and permitting processes to make EV charging station implementation easier, will there be a best practice or regional approach to assist cities in making those updates?
Yes, that is definitely something that we want to do, and we see the need to do that. So we will be working on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's actually one of those last projects that Amy highlighted. One of the most recent awards from the Department of Energy is for a program called EV Smart. Some of you may have heard us talk about a program called Soul Smart, which is a national designation program for solar-friendly communities. EV Smart will be essentially setting up a parallel national designation program for EV-friendly communities, and permitting ordinances, things like that is a really big part of that EV friendliness. So we do have some staff level recommendations. They haven't gone all the way through our committees and things like that, but we do have some recommendations around, like, if you're putting in a new parking facility, here's how many parking spaces should be set aside as either EV capable, EV ready, or EV installed. Those each have specific definitions. If you're interested, we're happy to share that. It's not something we're necessarily like broadcasting in webinar type forums yet, just because we haven't taken it, like I said, we haven't taken it through committees, but one-on-one, we're happy to provide that information. And then I'm also just going to invite everybody, if you would like to be part of our regional EV working group, EV infrastructure working group, talking about planning around the region. If you have not already put yourself on our list, if you want to just drop your email into the chat, I'll try to frantically collect those and we'll add you to our list to get those meetings started soon.
Yeah, and Lori, I can provide those to you. That's a great recommendation, especially because this is new territory for a lot of folks and stuff. So we appreciate that. Has there been any updates to the guidelines for rebates for government agencies? Last time I checked, they were still pending.
Susan, I think you're talking about the rebates for the, tax credits, of course, really only make sense for organizations with a tax liability, right? So those of you who represent cities or counties, you don't have a tax liability, so a tax credit doesn't do you a lot of good. But there was a provision in the Inflation Reduction Act that created what they're calling a direct pay option for tax exempt organizations. And it's, the best way we can articulate it is it's essentially like a rebate. So you file all the paperwork and then you get a check, I assume, or a voucher in an amount equivalent to what the tax credit would have been. So I have not seen any updates to those guidelines yet, Susan. We're keeping our eyes open for those. The IRS seems to be surprising everybody with something new on the Inflation Reduction Act tax credit information like every week. So we'll keep our eyes open and definitely update our funding website.
That's great. And it looks like we've got some email addresses that were dropped into the Q&A, and
perfect.
Sounds like some folks are having trouble with the chat. Please feel free to use the question and answer tab to post anything you want, or to drop your email address. For us, on behalf of the Economic Development District, that piece that Amy talked about as far as what having EV charging stations can do for a local community is so essential and vital to drawing economic development in a more creative way, and not maybe the traditional way of you bring a big box business and it draws jobs and that sort of thing, but sort of the concept of if you build it, they'll come. If there's a charging station somewhere, people need something to do, as Amy had highlighted, some potential options, retail or any sort of event or activity and stuff. These EV drivers are going to be routing their way to their destinations based on where those charging stations are. That means your community has that opportunity to, if you have an EV charging station, to really draw new folks into the community. You know, kind of, it's a great also marketing and trying to bring put your community on the map opportunity. So we encourage you to get involved, and we're going to, you know, obviously share the information that's been shared today, but I really do want to highlight that piece for the folks that are in economic development that are on the call, is that we're trying to share with you new ways in which economic development can be addressed or grown within your community that may not be so traditional. Looks like we're just getting some email addresses from folks, but Lori and Amy, first of all, thank you so much. I know there's a ton of information you shared today, that there's a ton of stuff going on, particularly with the infrastructure bill being passed a couple of years ago or a year and a half ago. So we look forward to continuing to host you guys when there are big updates like the one today, or the ones today. But if you have any last minute things you'd like to share or add, please let me know.
Everybody think good thoughts for us on those charging and fueling infrastructure proposals.
Yeah.
Someone posted, thank you DFW Clean Cities and COG for saving us countless hours of research by putting together this presentation in Q&A. Well done, and definitely well done. We're always so appreciative of this partnership with you.
Thank you. Glad it's helpful.
Yeah, any last minute questions from attendees? We've got a few minutes. No? Okay. Well, again, thank you. And for attendees, participants, we will share not only the links, the recording to this slide, to this presentation, and the presentation slides with you, so that you can dig down into all the information that was shared. And we look forward to continuing to keep you updated on what's going on with EV charging stations across Texas and across our region. So many thanks to attendees, and many, many thanks to Amy and Lori again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prit. We always appreciate your collaboration.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.